in 6 hours. Still things to do. Couple of repairs, nothing complicated, just routine. In a tank, though, enclosed space. Got to be careful. Careful because we know that enclosed spaces can kill. A recent study suggests that over the last 15 years or so, maybe up to 1,000 seafarers have died in enclosed spaces. We know that what really determines the safety of people working in enclosed spaces is not what goes on once they are in them, it's what should have gone on long before.
From a height of the tank.
So, got to be careful. But there are a lot of things to think about, a lot to consider. And if we want to live, we just can't afford to get it wrong. Life is important, so it's worth taking the time to make sure we don't lose ours. But how do we remember everything? The things that should have been done, the things we should do now. The space card. You could call it an aid memoir, a pocket checklist, an enclosed space entry card. Whatever you call it, the important thing is using it might just save your life. Stop. That's the first thing you do. Stop and carry out an on-the-spot risk assessment. Permit. Is there an enclosed space permit to work? Are other permits required for hot work, cold work, working with electricity, working from heights? If the task doesn't require permits, have you told someone you're about to enter an enclosed space? If the company has specific enclosed space entry procedures, including those for lone working, are you about to follow them? Assess. This is your own personal assessment, remember? You should have been involved in a pre-entry discussion or toolbox talk where all the risks were identified and then assessed as part of an overall enclosed space management plan, identifying what would be needed to make the entry and the work inside the enclosed space safe for the persons carrying that work out. But take a look around now. Has anything changed? Has the space been fully ventilated? Will ventilation continue during the task? If a permit to work is in place, the atmosphere checks will have been recorded, including oxygen levels. The permit must also record any necessary isolation of pipework and electrical supplies, according to any company locking off and tagging procedures. Are the backup people in position and aware of their responsibilities? Check. Check that all the equipment is appropriate for the task and working. Check that communication methods and intervals have been agreed. Check the action plan to make sure it is fully understood. Check you have the right PPE, personal protective equipment. Emergency procedures. Make sure that emergency equipment is to hand. Everyone should be familiar with the emergency procedures and their responsibilities when carrying out those procedures. Make sure you are carrying a gas detector, a whistle or air horn, and if there are identified or foreseeable risks associated with the atmosphere, an emergency escape breathing device. You may already have something similar to the space card on your ship. If so, use it, because the on-the-spot risk assessment really could save your life. But when it comes to enclosed spaces, If you still have doubts, if there is anything you are still not sure about, do not go in. No one can ever overstate the importance of competence, instruction and training. And that applies as much to whoever is going to remain at the entrance and monitor the task as it does to the people inside. How the task will be managed and by whom should have been clearly established as a result of the risk assessment and written into the safe system of work or action plan. The senior person must keep in regular contact with the person in the space to ensure that the safe system of work is being followed and that the space itself is being properly monitored. There should also be regular communication with the officer of the watch during the entry. If anything goes wrong, it will be he or she who will summon and then coordinate any emergency action. The senior person must remain at the entry point at all times. If things go wrong, other unprepared, unqualified people may attempt to intervene. Over 50% of the workers who die in enclosed spaces are those who instinctively rush in and attempt to rescue others. There should be regular radio checks. The atmosphere must be carefully and continually monitored. Any changes must be recorded. All activity in enclosed spaces must be carried out slowly and calmly. Even though the task has now begun, the risk assessment process should continue. Apart from monitoring the atmosphere and means of communication, we need to look out for familiar hazards, such as slips, trips, and falls. Apart from being slippery, a wet surface will increase the effect of electric shock in areas where electrical circuits, equipment, and tools are used. Loose, granular material stored in holds or tanks, such as grain, sand, coal, can engulf and suffocate a worker. We should watch out for the possibility of falling objects, particularly in spaces which have topside openings for entry and where tasks are being carried out above the worker. We should always have our own safety in mind. If there's going to be trouble in an enclosed space, you need to find it before it finds you.
Oxygen reading 20.9.
As for the task itself, stick to what was agreed. If a new problem is discovered, don't deviate from the action plan, however easy fixing the problem may seem. When it comes to avoiding death and injury, one thing is certain: procedures protect. But there is never any certainty about safety in enclosed spaces, and things can still go wrong. Suddenly, you have an emergency to deal with, and you need to have procedures in place for that, too. Those procedures should be considered as part of the risk assessment process. And the procedures must be clearly laid out as part of the action plan. Everyone needs to know exactly what to do. If suddenly the atmosphere changes, someone becomes ill, or suddenly trips, a vital piece of equipment fails. The team at the entry point should always be ready to implement backup procedures. A pre-agreed signal, such as 3 tugs on the lifeline, if the radio fails. Inside the space, there is no room for panic. All actions should be taken slowly and carefully. Whatever the emergency, there is only one way to make sure that the procedures for dealing with it are carried out effectively, and that's through practice. Carrying out enclosed space entry drills should be as frequent and as thorough as those carried out for firefighting, collisions, and abandoned ship. They allow the training to be evaluated. They allow problems to be exposed, questions to be answered, uncertainties removed. But drills must be realistic. All aspects must be considered and all actions, such as the correct use of equipment, followed through. But as individuals, there's something we always need to do, and that's remember not just our training, but the reason we have the training in the first place. We must remember that enclosed spaces kill. So before making any enclosed space entry, we must remember space. Remember how vital it is to stop and carry out an on-the-spot risk assessment. Permit. Have you got a permit to work? If not, then are you sure that somebody knows where you are? Assess. Take a look around. Has anything changed? Check that all the equipment is working. Check that communication methods and times have been agreed. Check the action plan to make sure it is fully understood. Emergency procedures. Make sure that emergency equipment is to hand and that everyone is familiar with the procedures. And when we're inside the space, keeping that risk assessment going, continually monitoring the workspace, the task, and the way in which the task is being performed. When the task has been completed, all relevant people must be informed, all equipment removed safely, and all permits cancelled. Depending on your company procedures, there may be documentation to be completed, and here is a good opportunity to discuss how things went, to identify any problems or concerns, to see if procedures, methods of working could be improved. Enclosed spaces can kill. So the most important thing to remember is that there are procedures on our ships designed to prevent those deaths, and that those procedures must be followed, even when we think there is no need for them. Because what needs doing may only take a few minutes, because we've done it many times before and nothing has ever gone wrong. Because the paperwork is too complicated and there just isn't the time. But when it comes to saving time, remember also what somebody once said. You're a long time dead.